Hey, good morning, guys. Welcome back to another video brought to you by your one and only literary pharaoh. I'm on the way to work this morning. I have a lot to talk about. I don't really have a specific, I don't even know what thumbnail I'm going to use for this particular video because I'm going to be all over the place. I may try to incorporate some sort of a collage of imagery to capture everything that I'm talking about. But just to be honest with you guys, there are many things I want to talk about. I want to talk about the Bud Crawford incident with the police in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm going to touch a little bit. I'm going to touch on the Charlie Kirk incident a little bit. And I'm going to probably just only talk about those two things. I'm not going to talk about Colorado football just yet. Even though they lost, I'm going to leave that for another video. So let's first start off with the Terrance Bud Crawford incident that occurred in Omaha. I don't know the details. I just recently watched Punch Drunk's social media, his YouTube video. I just got through watching that, his live. Bud was put in handcuffs, and you guys are probably asking, like, what did he do? I'm sure you guys can do the research to find out. So I'm really doing this video without thorough research, but I don't consider myself a reporter or a journalist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm going to be just talking about it from a surface level, and just pointing out the obvious of what's going on beneath the surface. Because on the surface we see police dealing with a black man, and I'm assuming that the police officer is not black or is not melanated. It's probably pale skinned. So it goes back to what everybody loves to talk about. I did a video on this when I was being very, very hypercritical on what's the guy's name that does Fearless on Jason Whitlock's channel, and he loves to talk about race, and these are the types of stories that he loves to jump on and use as a way to drive ratings, and people love it. You know, it's a consumer-based economy. It's a consumer-based media conglomerate, meaning that the consumer drives the narrative. So if consumers are continually hooked on race, then those who put forth content are only going to put forth content that deal with race. But then again, it's sort of an unfair proposition, because before the content creators put out anything that deals with race, the conditioning of the brains of the people, the psychological operation that's waged upon the minds of the people, the systematic brainwashing that's put forth upon the people, is perpetually done consistently. So it's easy to sort of drop red meat in the middle of lines, in the middle of hungry, ravenous lions, and what do you expect? The lions are going to attack the red meat. So I give that analogy because even without the racial elements or the racial stories that seem to take control of social media, before those racial stories occur, there's always a conditioning of racial divide that's perpetuated through legislation, political laws that are being pushed for. You have other YouTube channels that seem to stay on racial topics because they see everything through a racial lens. So once you've drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, once you've imbibed on that sort of concoction, then the ultimate enticement, or the ultimate draw, is for you to see a story that's dealing with a white cop and a black person, because you've already been preconditioned to see things through a racial lens. So I'm going to talk about this Terrance Bud Crawford thing with the police officer. We know for a fact that Bud is celebrating his win, his accomplishment. He's having his big time parade. It's analogous to a basketball team winning a championship and they're having their parade. Omaha, Nebraska, they are paying homage to Terrance Bud Crawford for his accomplishments. They're paying homage to him because he dared to be great. He's handled himself well as a professional boxer. You haven't heard anything with him out of the ring in terms of him getting in trouble with the law. This guy doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, he doesn't do any of those things. He's very disciplined, and he had a hard upbringing. If you watch and you pay attention to his story, you'll be inspired by what Bud Crawford has came from, what he has risen out of, and where he is today currently. It's an inspirational story, to say the least. So we all know, the entire police department of Omaha, Nebraska, they understand that there's a parade going on. I'm pretty sure they all know who Bud Crawford is. Whether you're a boxing fan or not, you know that there's a parade. So all different precincts are alerted that there's a parade. The reason why you have to alert the police department, because we understand that people can get a little bit out of control, especially if there's liquor involved or drugs involved. You know, people celebrate differently. So in order to keep things civil, keep things safe, you're going to have to include the police department. You can't have a parade and abandon the presence of police. It's impossible. So with that being said, everyone knows who Terrance Bud Crawford is. He gets pulled over. You don't know what he got pulled over for. Then he gets put into handcuffs. Now, on Punch Drunk's channel, he has a thumbnail saying that this could have been a George Floyd situation. Okay? And certain people are saying that, oh, you're exaggerating with that thumbnail. It would not have been a George Floyd situation, but how do we know that? How do we know that? And it's not that we're putting George Floyd and Terrance Bud Crawford on the same level. Certain people believe, and there goes the racial thing again, certain people believe that George Floyd was in the wrong. Some people believe he was high on fentanyl. He was not being cooperative with law enforcement. And because of the degree or the toxicity of the fentanyl that was in his system, that was more the cause of death than it was a knee on his neck. Then you have other people that are saying, no, he might have been high, but why did the white police officer have his knee on George Floyd's neck? And him having his knee on George Floyd's neck, that's what caused George Floyd to die, because he died from asphyxiation, he couldn't breathe, and he was basically suffocated to death because the knee was on his neck. Whatever story you believe, I don't give a damn. I really don't care. The comparison with George Floyd and Bud is not to say that George Floyd and Bud are both on drugs. It's not to say that both men are on the same level in terms of their status as civilians or as citizens of this nation. We're not saying that. The comparison that's being made is that it could have went wrong. When Punch Drunk Entertainment is making the comparison to the George Floyd narrative, he's saying that something could have went wrong, where it could have went for the worse. Terrance Bud Crawford could have been shot. Anything could have happened. All right, so that's the point that he's making. He's not stating whether George Floyd was innocent or not. That's not the point. You guys have to sometimes look at the bigger picture and stop focusing on the minutia, on the irrelevant details that aren't pertinent to the bigger story or the bigger point that's trying to be made. So Punch Drunk is making the bigger point that something catastrophic could have happened in that pullover, in Terrance Bud Crawford being pulled over. So, and I agree, something bad could have happened. But my thing is, and this is where it gets a little bit deeper, and some of you guys will probably turn off now because some of you guys lack the ability or the capacity to think critically, but me, I'm always thinking. It's very convenient around this Charlie Kirk thing that's going on, and there's always a racial divide, there's always a racial element. Every decade or so, there's something that happens that just stimulates those racial divisive themes that parades in the souls and hearts of many ignorant people. Both black and white play that game, but I'm more critical of black people because they get sucked in with the racial narratives, not understanding that Democrat and Republican are the same. They're on the same fucking team. Excuse my language. It's the same coin, just different sides of the same damn coin. They've been using these tactics to divide us for years. When I say divide us, I mean divide us as humans. If you just live your life and just take your own personal experience, I'm sure there've been a lot of a-holes that were your skin color that treated you like shit. And there have also been people who are not your skin color that treated you like royalty. So we don't hear enough stories about the greatness of our diverse components. We don't hear many stories about that. What we do hear is one-offs. We hear one story, which most of the times are false flag events, or some of them are precedents. These precedents are called stories that are purposely manufactured by the media. It's a CIA operation. They do these things to brainwash, condition, and manipulate narratives and to manipulate talking points, and also thus to push forth legislation to have more of a control of humanity and the masses, done underneath the guise of safety. Because understand, you got to give all these rights to black people because black people are always being mistreated. When in actuality, the more rights that we think we're getting, the more crippled we become. The more crippled we become. Because we become people that are functioning off of charity. We no longer want to work hard to be qualified for something. We want a handout because we see ourselves as victims. And that to me is a killer of drive. It incentivizes lethargy, and it helps you as a person embrace victimhood, embrace impotence, because you're already saying that somebody has power over you. Now, a lot of people talk about the systems that are in place. They talk about, the system, it makes it hard for a black man. What system? We're all functioning underneath the same system. I think the system that makes it hard for everybody. The only people that are prospering in this system are the elites who control the system, and there's a small few of those. And those elites are handlers who handle many people that you guys deem to be famous, like presidents, governors, celebrities, prime ministers of different nations. Those are not the ones in power. The ones in power you will never see. Those that you see are the ones that are being handled. They have handlers. The Israeli Mossad are very powerful. The American CIA, the FBI. These governmental agencies are powerful. They can slaughter people. They can start wars. They can assassinate innocent people and fabricate crimes and place them upon you and say that you were killed because you did this. They have the technology with artificial intelligence to drudge up false images of you doing something that you didn't do. They can make you be somewhere that you're not. This is called manipulation. That's why it's called programming. Whenever you channel into these various networks, your soul is being channeled through a vortex of manipulation, and you fall deeper into it, and you find yourself psychotically embedded into their cycle. It's a vicious cycle. It never ends. So I think that the timing of this incident with Bud Crawford is very, very it makes me raise my eyebrows a bit, right? It causes for skepticism, because what's going on with the Charlie Kirk thing, with him being allegedly assassinated, and there's a bunch of racial undertones and overtones with that. Okay, you have a lot of black people who were actually celebrating his death, and not because he was just an evil man, not because he was evil, because he said things that they didn't agree with. They looked at him as a white supremacist or whatever it is, white supremacy. Personally, to me, I think that the term white supremacy in and of itself is a defeating term, because if you're supreme, you don't need to mention it. Anyone who's inferior needs to mention how supreme they are. If you're absolutely supreme, nature will tell you who's supreme. The sun will tell you who's supreme. Your melanin content or lack thereof will tell you who's supreme. Nature tells you who's supreme, not social constructs or social engineering or systems you put in place to make yourself supreme, allegedly, which I don't believe in these systems. I believe that the system that corrupts us are the narratives that are pushed that psychologically manipulates our thinking to think that we are part of a fallen system that keeps the black man down. I think that's the weapon. The weapon is not the system. Because if you think about it, as I'm driving to work this morning, there are many white people in cars that are going to work too. It's not like it's a bunch of black people who work and white people don't work. White people deal with the same things that black people deal with. We just love to hinge our history on this 400 years of slavery, and we've been like, even that slave narrative is a fucking lie. Excuse my language. It's not even told correctly. They don't tell you that there were white Slavs that came here through the East, through New York. They don't tell you that. They don't tell you that the people who had black face were actually white people who were working in coal mines. They were the true black face, not black people. They don't tell you that the Niji, the original foundational black Americans that were here before Columbus even thought of what America could be. Before, it wasn't even called America, it was called Turtle Island. The foundational black people that were here, that were indigenous to this land, who were here first, had to teach Caucasians, the pale skins, how to farm. The Atlantic slave trade narrative is inaccurate. You don't have boats full of slave boats, slave ships that didn't even exist, because the first cargo ship didn't exist till 1858, and slavery, the Atlantic slave trade, happened way before 1858. So what kind of slave ship are they talking about? And let's say a cargo ship did exist back in the 1400s, which it didn't, but let's give them that it didn't happen. Let's give them that. They wouldn't even be able to transport that many slaves across the Atlantic because of the ocean gyres, because the way the water goes back in an counterclockwise fashion, you wouldn't be able to cross by boat. You would sink. And how would you be able to take a bunch of slaves for that long of a journey without food and water? You have them chained up to each other. They'll die of sicknesses and diseases. You don't want your slaves to be weak. If you want slaves, you want them to be strong and healthy so they can work for you. That's the purpose of getting slaves, right? You don't want them sickly. You know, even when we buy machines, we don't buy machines to work for us that are susceptible to being broken. We buy machines that are sturdy, that are strong, that are going to be durable. That's what we depend on. So if these black people were supposedly from Africa, white Americans wanted them to be slaves, you would want them to come into America very, very healthy and well fed. That whole story is just backwards. We've been fucking lied to. We've always been lied to. And that's the point that I'm trying to make. The story about Bud Crawford, it could be a precedent story. You say, why do you say precedent story? Well, it means that this cop could have been paid off to do that intentionally, to draw attention to a racial element. And the racial element is something that's purposely infused in our day-to-day living. It happens incrementally. Maybe every month or so you'll have a racial story. You have people posting Instagram stories about racial things that are happening, whether at school, whether at their jobs. Like, we love to keep this racial thing going. But people like me and many of you that are watching this video, you just like to live life. And you live life through your experiences. And I tell people all the time, like, your consciousness, the status of your consciousness is dependent upon the experiences that you have. Now, if you have an experience that's based upon someone else's experience, then you're being hijacked. Your soul is being hijacked, and you're getting put on a frequency that you have no business being on. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that just because you are a melanated person, or AKA a black person, and let's say you've never personally dealt with racism before, but because you keep hearing the stories about racism, you watch news about racism, you keep getting pumped stories about how black people were slaves and black people were hung and black this. They don't tell you about the stories about how many white people were being killed by blacks either. They don't tell you those though, but they love to paint the black person as the victim all the time. If you continue to listen to those stories, then you end up wearing that jacket. You end up wearing that persona of a person that's a victim without even consciously doing it. Maybe you do it subconsciously, but you end up doing it. So what happens is that you end up looking through the lens of a racially inferior person, or a person deeming himself or herself as a person that's oppressed. And when you do that, you function differently. But yet in your life personally, you've never even dealt with racism to that degree, but you're putting yourself in that lane. That's incongruous, folks. That causes a divide. That's the first precursor to psychosis, because you're living a lie. That's what they mean by living a lie. Because your experiences doesn't tell you that. I'm gonna live my experience. What I've heard about white people being this or that and race and this I've heard those things. What I have lived is not that. I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. No, I'll be dumb to say that. But is racism the general rule? Is racism the common aspect of our civilization? I say no. I say everyone is struggling. Everyone's trying to make a dollar. Everyone's trying to do the best that they can to raise their children, to raise their kids. Everyone is doing the best that they can. And I think that for the most part, humanity, it doesn't matter what race you are, humanity as a whole, we just want peace. There's a few out there that are riding on this racial wave, and there's some people out there that love to push the racial element because it makes them money. Divide benefits those who control the system. Think about it for a second. Anything that happens, you got to ask yourself the question: who benefits from it? Whoever benefits from it is the culprit. So this story with Bud Crawford, the timing of it is strange. I think, I could be wrong, I'm not saying that I'm absolute in this, but I'm going to give my 2 cents. I think that what that cop or that police officer did, he was put up to that. I think that it was done intentionally. It's a big story. It brings eyes on the racial element again, because you already have Punch Drunk on his channel. I'm sure you're going to have other boxing pundits and other boxing content creators. I'm sure they're going to talk about the same thing as well. They're going to talk about, hey, you know, Bud Crawford got pulled over, got put in handcuffs, and you know, then people are going to add the racial stuff, and you're going to have some people saying, yeah, it's been 400 years that we've been free, yet we still have to deal with race. Like, shut the F up. No one's oppressed. I'm in my car driving to work. I work in a place that has AC. Now, granted, I understand that everybody that goes to work is underneath the slave system. I've always said that. I already said that we are all industrial and indentured slaves, and we are industrial slaves, and we're working for slave notes, which is money that's now digital currency is taking over. So they're going to start to dictate our movements and dictate the things we do in order to gain that credit, because everything's going to be turned digital, and it's already being done right before our eyes. I digress. So the point is, we're all slaves to a certain degree, but that's the equality that we all have. It's not like a bunch of white people are at home sitting back, kicked back, while all black people are going to work. That's not the world we live in. Everyone's going to work. Indian, Mexican, this is the America that we live in. But America loves to use race, and they purposely do this, and they insult our intelligence. Actually, they're not even insulting our intelligence. We don't even have the intelligence. So they're just doing exactly what they know that we can handle. And because we are incapable of thinking critically, we just fall into the trap. We bite the bait. They make it seem like race is all about black and white. It's not about black and white. Actually, no one's actually technically black. It's a social, it's an identification marker. No one's actually white either. They have different skin hues, but they've used this for years to divide us. And the various skin tones are so many that to just dumb things down and to its most simple means, and then say that it's all about just black and white, doesn't really make sense. It's much more complex than that. Our existence on this planet is much more complex than a freaking black and white that we always talk about. So there's deeper meaning into the black and white, but I don't even want to go there. I don't want to digress. I want to stay on topic. So the Bud Crawford story, to me, they knew who Bud Crawford was. I think that this was intentionally done. It continually paints the African American male or woman as a victim of some sort of white supremacy thing that's going on. And here we go. And for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about how Terrance Bud Crawford got pulled over by a white cop. but this is intentionally done. I mean, why did you pull him over? What was he doing? And you put him in cuffs, so you arrested him. What did you arrest him for? This is just harassment. This is a choreographed event, staged event. But the thing about these stage events, they sort of convolute the reality of certain events that are real, and certain events that are staged, and certain events that are false flags. Not everything that the news gives out is a lie, but that's the confusing part. That's part of the chaotic element of our society, and that's part of the satanic system that we're under. In a book called the Bible, it talks about how the devil is the master of confusion. Satan is the master of confusion. He loves confusion. Well, if you ever questioned what system we're being under and who rules this system, it's definitely the devil. It's definitely Satan. It's definitely that dark element. I don't believe in a personal devil or Satan. When I talk about devil or Satan, I'm basically using the rhetoric of the normal, everyday human being or the Christian, because you guys love to talk in those terms. So I'm speaking to you in ways that you can understand, but I don't believe what you believe. I don't believe in that Bible nonsense. I'm just using terms like devil and Satan to let you know that there's a dark force and there's a light force. There's good vibration, there's high frequency, and you have low vibration and low frequency. All right? Both the dark and light, both are supposed to work harmoniously together to build balance. So you can never have imbalance. But what's happening is that our civil existence, supposedly civil, is hijacked and raped by darkness, by Satan. And that's why confusion reigns. That's why confusion is everywhere. Now, let me segue to the Charlie Kirk thing. Like I said, the Terrance Crawford thing is just to me, it's a manufactured story, because nothing happened to him. He didn't get shot at. They handcuffed him. It's just to make news. There's certain things that are purposely done to drive narratives, folks. And I want you guys to start thinking about that. If you think that everything is news for a reason, and then again, it depends on what lens you're looking from. If you're looking from a racial lens, then you're gonna bite this. This is food. This is food for your thought. This is food to infuse you with more elements to feed your worldview of this racial divide, of this racial oppression that you seem to be under. So you're gonna be, ha, there you go again. A white cop pulled over. There are many. Do you know, guys, black cops pull over black people too? Do you know that sometimes black cops treat black people like shit? But we don't hear those stories though. But we gotta have the white cop doing it though, so we can push that. And I'm not here to marginalize anybody's personal experiences. I have friends, I've known of people, even Punch Drunk talked about his personal experience with cops. All right? And he's a Latino, he's a melanated guy, and the narrative that he gave, the story that he talked about was a black cop that was mistreating him, and a white cop was back there shaking his head like, man, this is wrong. So the whole thing is a mess. It's not about black or white, it's about individual characters that do stupid stuff. And unfortunately, whenever you have the black and white element and all hell breaks loose, it's sort of like the movie The Last of Us, right? Immediately those zombies get a sniff of you, or they hear you, it's a wrap. They all wake up and they all start charging the person to consume them, to convert them into zombies. All right? The fungus responds that way. That's what I look at racial narratives as. It's sort of like a fungus. When you have the news that comes out of a white cop doing anything to a black person, oh my God, everybody raises up. Everyone's antennas are up, and they're ready to infuse their racial narratives into the racial pot, and everybody's talking about race. It's stupid. But I'm intelligent enough to know that you got to pump the brakes and talk about life from your own experience. If you have not experienced it, then back off. It's not to say that other people are not experiencing it, but are people, is the average black man or the average black woman, are we experiencing, cops harassing us daily? Are we experiencing police brutality daily, routinely? consistently, incrementally, I don't know, every quarterly, every 3 months. I mean, you tell me, how often is this happening? It's not happening that often, folks. Yes, it happens. You have some a-holes that are police officers that have a gun and a badge, and they abuse their power. We get it. Both white and black and Mexican and Chinese. Doesn't matter what race you are. You just have a-holes in every race. But don't let it be a black man that's on the opposite side of the law. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. If it's a black cop treating a black civilian improperly, that doesn't make news because it doesn't drive the narrative. You understand that? It's not about fairness, folks. It's all about the racial element. That's what I'm trying to get you guys to understand. So we hear stories so much, segueing here into the Charlie Kirk incident. We understand that the Charlie Kirk story is the stories that they're giving us. We know we're being lied to. We're being lied to. And then YouTube has the nerve to censor people that are asking questions, that are speaking boldly against the lies. So because of that, I'm going to be very, very careful how I use my words. I'm going to say that we are allegedly being lied to. Okay? I have to use the word allegedly. Okay? We know from the video through watching it that he was set up. Something inside of his shirt moved. He wasn't sniped. There are plenty of content creators that are exposing this. And until today, we don't even know if they didn't even want to do an autopsy. That's how you know it's a cover-up. When an autopsy is not done, it's a cover-up. That's just to let you know that there are different levels to this existence that we call reality. If you are a powerful person and you have influence, you are susceptible to being killed by the government that perpetuates laws to protect civilians and keep them safe. Let me say that again. If you are a powerful person and you have the power of influence, if you are on the wrong side of the government in terms of being somebody that can be a threat to the government, you will be killed legally. And I say legally because they do it legally, because nothing happens to them. The FBI can kill you. The CIA can kill you. The Israeli Mossad can kill you. The Israeli Mossad and the American CIA are one and the same. The American CIA are nothing but a subordinate form of the Israeli Mossad. Okay? They can take you out, and then they can just say, oh, it was an accidental death. Oh, it was an accidental drowning. Oh, the person was sick. You watch those movies, they tell you what they're doing. You have snipers that can come in and just take you out. You have assassins that would just kill you. And then they get off scot-free. They can just pin the murder on somebody else.